In 1986, Ducati did the unthinkable. They took their legendary V-twin engine and buried it alive under a mountain of plastic. This is the story of a bike that promised a high-speed revolution but ended up alienating every purist in Italy. Was it a masterpiece or a mechanical tomb? In November 1985, at the Milan Motorcycle Show, Cagiva unveiled the Paso 750, designed by Massimo Tamburini. Following Cagiva's acquisition of Ducati earlier that year, Tamburini sought to redefine the sport bike. He did not set out to provoke. He was executing a precise philosophy of industrial design. During the mid-1980s, motorcycle engineering began moving toward enclosed aerodynamic forms. Tamburini believed a high-performance machine should exist as a single, integrated object rather than a collection of exposed mechanical parts. To him, traditional motorcycles were cluttered and inefficient. The Paso was conceived as a closed-shape concept, a clean shell where the rider, engine, and chassis merged into one fluid silhouette. Every element, down to the hidden fasteners and recessed bolts, was designed to eliminate visual noise. This was a rigorous attempt to control airflow, reduce drag, and elevate motorcycle design to the precise standards of advanced automotive engineering. Cagiva put this design philosophy to a public vote in a remarkably tight time frame. Within just 14 months, Massimo Tamburini drove the Paso from initial concept drawings directly to production tooling. When the finished prototype rolled onto the stage at the Milan Motorcycle Show, it challenged everything Ducati enthusiasts held sacred. The traditional Ducati was an exhibition of raw mechanical muscle, steel trellis frames, exposed cooling fins, and Desmodromic valve gear left open to the elements. The Paso hid all of it. A thick fiberglass envelope swallowed the entire machine, concealing the chassis, the carburetors, and the L-twin engine itself. For the press and the public at the official 1986 unveiling, the physical reality of this design was jarring. Tamburini's obsession with visual order meant every fastener was recessed, every joint seamless. This was a radical bet that riders wanted a clean, integrated sculpture rather than an exposed mechanical beast. The engine, long celebrated as the historic heart of the brand, had completely disappeared from view. To the Ducati faithful, a motorcycle was not supposed to be clean, it was supposed to be a mechanical exhibition. The Paso's unbroken bodywork stripped away the very elements that defined the brand's identity. Gone were the steel trellis frame, the rough cast cooling fins, and the exposed Desmodromic cylinder heads. In their place sat a smooth, bulbous shell that critics likened to a bar of soap. This visual effect did more than alter the bike's silhouette. It removed the aggression, the noise, and the mechanical theater that riders expected from an Italian sport bike. For the purists, this went far beyond a minor styling complaint. It was a brand identity crisis. They did not see a futuristic design, they saw a sanitization of their culture. By wrapping the L-twin engine in fiberglass, Tamburini had silenced the visual music of the machine. The Paso did not look like a weapon, it looked like a consumer appliance, sterile and detached. They felt that Cagiva had stripped Ducati of its character to chase a sterile modernism. This total enclosure broke the connection between the rider and the engineering beneath, turning what should have been an emotional bond into a plastic barrier. Ducati riders read their machines through the exposed components, and when those components vanished, the soul of the brand seemed to vanish with them. In 1986, the Paso did not look like a motorcycle to the average rider. It looked like a high-end European appliance. Critics called it a motorized bar of soap or a front-loading washing machine, comparing its smooth fiberglass panels to household white goods. At a time when sport bikes were expected to look aggressive, raw, and dangerous, the Paso was quiet, clean, and polite. It seemed better suited for a modern living room than a mountain pass. The market judged the bike using a standard of beauty that demanded exposed mechanical clutter, completely rejecting Tamburini's vision of total integration. But aesthetic judgments change. By 2026, the very design choices that repelled riders in the 1980s have turned the Paso into a celebrated artifact of retrofuturism. In a market saturated with hyper-aggressive, angular machines, the Paso's seamless envelope reads as bold, refreshing, and brilliantly odd. Younger collectors, drawn to the pastel gradients and clean geometries of the vaporwave aesthetic, prize the bike as a classic of late 20th century minimalism. The plastic barrier that once alienated purists now serves as a canvas of historical cool. The Paso itself never changed. Instead, the culture around it evolved to finally appreciate a machine that arrived 4 decades too early. Underneath the unbroken fiberglass bodywork lay an engine designed to breathe the open air now trapped in a thermal tomb. The original 1986 Paso 750 utilized a classic 748 cubic centimeters L-twin. This power plant relied entirely on airflow across its cooling fins, assisted only by 2 small oil radiators to dissipate heat. But the design prioritized aerodynamics above all else. The engineering team chased an ambitious drag coefficient of 0.39, sealing the engine bay to eliminate turbulence and drag. This tight packaging left almost no room for fresh air to circulate. Instead of flowing through the engine bay, oncoming air swept cleanly over the smooth fiberglass shell. The Desmo engine became the victim of its own wrapper. In real-world riding conditions, this aerodynamic triumph collapsed. At speed on the highway, the system managed, but stop-and-go city riding turned the enclosed bodywork into an oven. Without a steady stream of high-velocity air, the cylinder heads baked in their own trapped thermal energy. The heat rose rapidly, causing fuel in the dual-throat Weber carburetor to boil, which led to vapor lock, uneven idling, and engine stumbles. The physical packaging of the bike made overheating inevitable. This thermal bottleneck forced a fundamental redesign. When Ducati introduced the 906 Paso in late 1988, the company abandoned the air-cooled architecture entirely. The new 904 cubic centimeters engine relied on a pressurized liquid cooling system, complete with a radiator, water pump, and thermostat. This transition was a direct, practical response to the original model's physical limits. Adding liquid cooling solved the thermal crisis, but it also added weight, plumbing, and mechanical complexity to a machine built on the premise of simplicity. The evolution from the 750 to the 906 proved that the Paso's futuristic closed-shape silhouette carried severe engineering penalties from day one. To own a classic Ducati was always to accept a certain mechanical intimacy. Riders expected to adjust Desmodromic valves and balance carburetors as part of a sacred ritual. But the Paso transformed this ritual into an exhausting chore. Tamburini's obsession with an unbroken silhouette meant that almost every routine service required complete strip-downs of the bodywork. To perform a simple task like changing the spark plugs or checking the oil level, a mechanic could not simply reach into the frame. They had to systematically unbolt the extensive fiberglass panels, carefully negotiating hidden fasteners and fragile tabs that were prone to cracking with age. What took minutes on a traditional exposed trellis-frame Ducati now stretched into hours of careful, frustrating disassembly. The factory-engineered perfection on the showroom floor became a labor-intensive nightmare in the workshop. This was where clever packaging crossed the line into user-hostile design. The integrated shell did not just protect the machine, it locked the owner out. Mechanics in dealership workshops began charging premium labor rates just to access the engine, driving up the cost of ownership and damaging the bike's reputation among everyday riders. A simple tune-up became a major financial commitment. These maintenance hurdles were not isolated inconveniences. They compounded the motorcycle's existing thermal issues. Because accessing the engine bay was so labor-intensive, routine inspections were frequently deferred. Minor coolant leaks on the liquid-cooled 906 went unnoticed until they caused major engine damage. A cracked plastic coolant reservoir or a failing water pump seal buried deep within the plastic tomb remained hidden until steam poured from the fairing. The Paso demanded absolute precision to run, yet its physical design actively discouraged the very maintenance required to keep it alive. Massimo Tamburini's quest for a compact, fast-steering silhouette led to a chassis choice that would quietly sentence the Paso to obsolescence. The motorcycle rolled out on 16-inch aluminum Marvick wheels, wrapped in radial tires designed specifically for this machine. The original 750 carried an unconventional low-profile radial setup, a 130/60 up front and a 160/60 at the rear. These shrunk the overall rolling diameter to just 22 inches, giving the bike its crouched, aggressive stance. This packaging sparked a persistent myth that the Paso rode on tiny 14-inch wheels. In reality, the rims were 16 inches, but the unusually short tire sidewalls created the optical illusion of a miniature wheel. It was a clever handling solution in 1986, but it rested on a fatal assumption that tire manufacturers would support this bespoke size forever. They did not. By the early 2000s, Pirelli and Michelin discontinued their specialized 16-inch radial lines, with Michelin officially stopping production of its compatible series in 2006. Because the Paso's swing arm and front fork clearance were engineered strictly around these compact tire dimensions, fitting modern 17-inch wheels was not a simple drop-in swap. It required complex machining, custom spacers, or entire swing arm modifications. The tire market moved on, leaving Paso owners stranded. Finding replacement rubber became an exhausting scavenger hunt, turning a highly capable sport bike into a static garage ornament. The very wheel specification that gave the Paso its rapid steering ultimately orphaned the motorcycle, proving that design brilliance is only as durable as the aftermarket that sustains it. By 1990, the engineering compromises of the Paso had hardened into a stark commercial reality. Cagiva had acquired Ducati in 1985, hoping the Paso would serve as a high-margin technological showcase to revitalize the brand. Instead, the rising warranty costs, complex assembly line, and flatlining sales created an unsustainable financial drain on a company that was already structurally fragile. Production of the Paso line quietly ground to a halt by 1991, with fewer than 10,000 total units built over its entire life cycle. For Cagiva's management, the experiment was a bruising lesson in market psychology. They had assumed that riders wanted a clean, futuristic, fully enclosed appliance. In reality, the market was actively rejecting complexity in favor of raw, unadorned mechanical connection. To survive, Ducati had to dismantle the very philosophy that built the Paso. The company needed a strategic reset, a motorcycle that was cheap to produce, easy to maintain, and completely stripped of plastic barriers. This corporate pressure directly set the stage for designer Miguel Galuzzi's radical counter-concept, the Monster. Unveiled in the early 1990s, the Monster was the anti-Paso. It was a trellis frame, a fuel tank, and an engine, with absolutely nothing hidden. The Paso's commercial failure forced Ducati to stop designing for wind tunnels and start listening to the showroom floor. The experiment ended, but it taught the company exactly what riders would actually buy, proving that the most profitable path forward was to strip everything away. Today, the Paso's once derided quirks are exactly what make it a prized possession. A new generation of collectors, free from the historical expectations of what a Ducati should be, looks at this fully enclosed silhouette and sees a masterpiece of industrial design. In online forums and enthusiast groups, the conversation has shifted. No longer dismissed as a commercial misstep, the motorcycle is celebrated for its uncompromising commitment to a single visual idea. This reappraisal isn't about improved performance or retrofitted parts, it is a shift in the cultural lens. In a world of uniform, aggressive sport bikes, the Paso's clean, monolithic bodywork stands out as an emblem of retro-futuristic optimism. It has transitioned from a bad motorcycle to a beautiful failure, a machine that dared to defy its own time and paid the price. By refusing to compromise on his aesthetic vision, Massimo Tamburini created a design object that simply had to wait for the world to catch up. The Paso proved that radical styling cannot bypass the physical realities of cooling, serviceability, and parts supply. By enclosing the entire machine, Massimo Tamburini exposed the hard limits of aesthetic integration. Yet this expensive gamble was a necessary step toward maturity. The engineering trials of this experiment forced Ducati to reconcile striking visual form with functional reality. The proof of this evolution arrived in 1994 with the legendary Ducati 916. On that machine, Tamburini delivered breathtaking beauty, but designed it with accessible mechanical components and functional cooling. The Paso was the necessary precursor that made the 916 possible. Tamburini was a brave risk-taker who pushed design to its physical limits. His creation remains a reminder that some failures are essential to progress. These setbacks matter because they show the industry exactly where the future breaks. Today, the boundary between visionary genius and beautiful disaster remains razor-thin. The Paso proved that revolutionary design requires an audience ready to receive it. As modern sport bikes increasingly wrap themselves in seamless, aerodynamic shapes, Tamburini's gamble no longer looks like madness. It looks like the future we finally grew into. Was the Paso a failure, or were we just not ready? Share your thoughts below.